Chapter 1. A Day of Firsts. The first few years were uneventful. I was born and I grew, showing a bit of my intelligence and awareness, but not more than to make anyone think I was anything more than a bright young dwarf. I kept quiet, listened, watched, and learned. Deep lore was my specialty, but this world was something entirely different. I had been reincarnated once more, this in the land of Tolkien's Middle-earth. This was a world I loved dearly and was excited to be in, but as much as Tolkien went into the lore of the world, one thing he neglected was banners and heraldry, especially among dwarves. My formative years were spent learning the names of less notable bloodlines, the sigils of different clans and families. This was made easier because of the family I had been born into. The House of Durin, of the Longbeard clan, a direct descendant of Thror, king under the mountain, daughter to Dain II Ironfoot, and younger sister to Thorin III. My mother was Ragnhild Stonevine, daughter of Hrolder Stonevine. Thorin was named after our cousin, who you very likely know to be Thorin Oakenshield. We grew up in the Iron Hills, not as wanderers or displaced kin, but as part of a stronghold that had endured when others had fallen. Our people were exiles from Erebor, in the sense that all Durin's folk were cut off from the ancestral seat of our line. But the Iron Hills were no camp of desperation. They were a working realm, sustained by iron, stone, and discipline. Our wealth was not measured in gold hoarded beneath a mountain, but in steel that held true and names that still carried weight. Father ruled, but he also worked. When he chose to stand at an anvil, it was not from necessity, but from principle. Craft was not beneath a lord, nor was leadership an excuse to forget how stone and metal answered the hand. Mother, meanwhile, was a keeper of names, bloodlines, clans, and histories, because memory, too, was a kind of stronghold. We were not beggars, nor were we idle nobles living on remembered glory. We were expected to know who we were and why that mattered. As direct descendants of Thror, we were respected and given due consideration, but never indulgence. Even as children, Thorin and I were expected to learn the names, sigils, and lineages of each of the 7 houses and their lesser branches. The loss of Erebor was no excuse to ignore one's responsibilities or duties. In fact, in the minds of dwarves, it made such things even more urgent and important. I did not consider our life wanting. The Iron Hills were stern and focused on work and duty, yes, but they were ours. And, unlike Erebor, they endured. Cousin Thorin Oakenshield, however, had been born heir to Erebor itself. To him, even a strong realm likely felt like poverty. That difference, the gulf of scale between Erebor's grandiosity and the practical functionality of the Iron Hills, likely felt like being thrown from a palace into a gutter. It was no wonder that he and his people chose to migrate to the Blue Mountains instead. One curious difference between the original story and this one, apart from my presence of course, was that Cousin Thorin had his father's ring of power. Apparently in this version of the world, Thror had left the ring with Thorin, telling him that once he had retaken Erebor, Thorin was to bring the ring there so that he might wear it once more. After so many years since his departure, it had been accepted that Thror had died in his attempt to retake the mountain, and Thorin had claimed it as his own. Once, when the entirety of the family had gathered for dinner, he brought the ring out and showed it to the children, telling us that one day he would retake the mountain, and that on that day he would wear the ring as all kings of Erebor had before him. Merida? Thorin, my brother, called. He was only 2 years older than I was, but he held that age difference up like a badge of office. I was standing on a small block that allowed me to watch one of the clan's craftsmen work his chisel almost invisibly against the metal of a sword's tang, working a series of runes into it. I looked up from the work and found him standing in the doorway of the workshop. "Yes, brother?" I asked. "Father sent for you," he replied as he turned and waved for me to follow. "Come along. We mustn't keep him waiting." I smiled up at the smith and gave him a grateful touch on the arm. "I'll be back," tomorrow. We'll continue your lesson then, little lady, the smith chuckled. I hopped off the block and followed Thorin. The halls were a swarm of activity as always, with dwarves moving to and fro in a long practice swarm of work that required hauling of materials and goods from one place to another. The music of the dwarves was a deep beauty that couldn't truly be described. The treble of hammers at their anvils, the bass of the bellows, the chorus of singing voices to help with the work would cast a spell on anyone, welcoming them to join in on the efforts with a warm embrace. There was a sense of deep camaraderie as kith and kin worked together, with children of different ages hovered like pilot fish, picking up small lessons and helping how they could. It took us several minutes to arrive at our home, a defensible corner of the clan grounds with a few guards standing about. As we entered, Mother was tucking wraps of dried meat into a bag. "Your father has been waiting for you two," she said as she came out of the kitchen and handed me the bag. She smiled and shooed me off. "Go on then. He'll be waiting for you in the market. Bring him that and send him my love." I looked at the bag curiously, then back up at Mother. "Is he going west again? This won't be nearly enough food." Mother laughed and tasseled my red hair, causing the single thick braid to waggle behind me. "'Tis not my place to say. Now, do as I say, and bring that to your da, lass." A smile and nod was my reply. "Yes, ma'am." If she wasn't going to tell me what the bag was for, it meant that there was surprise in the bringing of the package. Thorin and I hurried through the halls. The market wasn't far. Dwarven markets were different from the markets of other races in my experience. Human markets were set up in a chaos of who got there first, setting up their stalls and shouting to the passers-by to come and see their wares. Elven markets were quiet and had a flow about them, with different wares having some semblance of the stalls next to them so that goods flowed seamlessly from one need to another, with the elves not need to attract buyers because the natural flow brought the right people to the right stall. Dwarven markets, though? Dwarven markets were strictly organized, with sections of different goods, separated with wider walking paths. Large pylons reached up to the hewn cavern ceiling with the market section clearly marked on them, so even people new to the market could find their way. The dwarves running the stalls would actively praise the works they sold and fiercely haggle over prices in what was essentially a game of wits, where a good story was worth losing a few coins over a deal. Dwarves were a wonderful contradiction of staunch pragmatism and romanticized storytellers, so coin and taels were welcome currency depending on the deal. Finding Father in the market proved to be a more difficult prospect than I had thought it would be. Typically, he would wait for us at the entrance, but today he was already inside. For some reason I couldn't understand, Thorin was letting me lead the search. I had gone to the forge section first, where one might buy new minerals, metals, flux, wood, or other crafting supplies, expecting that to be the place I'd find him first. When I didn't find him there, I moved to the provisions section, where one could find different foods, drinks, mostly ales and beers, and dried goods. When he wasn't there, I went to the alchemical section, the surface goods section, and finally found him in the cloth and leather goods section. "Da!" I shouted as I caught sight of him. I ran up to him as he turned to the sound of my voice. Even in his younger days, he already looked the part of the king he would eventually become. The first thing anyone noticed was his thick, copper-red beard. Long already, but not the iron-bound mass it would eventually become. He kept it braided at the sides to keep it clear of sparks and soot, though the ends were singed and darkened from long hours at the forge, and a bit of white had begun to poke its way through the sea of fire around his chin. His face was broad and heavy-boned, features set into the blunt, unyielding shape they would keep for the rest of his life, with lines at the corners of his eyes that came from squinting into the heat and glare of a forge. His nose had been badly broken at one point and set without much care, and he never bothered to have it fixed. He wore a thick wool tunic, dark brown and belted at the waist. His boots were iron-capped and scarred, soles thick enough to stand at the forge all day without complaint. He wore no ornamentation apart from 2 rings in his mustache, which he had fashioned into a mimicry of boar's tusks. His smile at seeing his children approaching was like watching a mountain crack with joy. He squatted down and scooped me up. "Merida, where have you been, lass?" I loved his accent, a thick and rich Highland Scottish that trilled the R in my name like fingers on a harp. "She was with Master Clorvin," Thorin answered for me. "Ah," Father acknowledged. "He must truly see some potential in you, lass. Clorvin's not one to suffer fools or sluggards. If he's letting you watch, it means he believes you'll make a fine smith or rune crafter." I gave a proud smile. "I hope I can make the clan proud with my work." Father chuckled and set me down, taking the bag from me in the process. "Of that, I have no doubt, lass. Now, you two come with me. We need to find something." "What are we looking for?" I asked curiously. "A cloak," Father replied as he led us through the market. As we walked, dwarves gave respectful nods and bows of their heads. He was Lord of the Iron Hills, after all, and his leadership had made the realm prosperous and peaceful. That was a strange answer. "Could Mother not make you one?" I asked as I increased my pace to bring me up to his side. "Aye, that she could," he replied as he continued through the market, stopping at a stall where an elderly dwarf woman sat. "But I'm not buying a cloak for myself." The woman stood and bowed her head. Her hair was long and white, braided like snow-capped mountain peaks. Dwarves were proud of their hair and never cut or shore it for any reason but shame. A male dwarf's beard was a sign of his experience and long life, and so it was for a female dwarf's hair. "Lord Dain, what brings you to my humble stall?" she asked. Her eyes were respectful and moved from Father to Thorin, then to me, acknowledging us each in kind. Father hooked his thumbs into his belt. "I was told it was ready. I'd like to claim it so that I can take her out." The woman's smile seemed to sparkle with memory as she looked at me. "Aye, give me a moment." She turned and moved into the back of her stall, sorting through some boxes before finding what she was looking for. It was a package wrapped in white roughspin. She leaned over the counter and offered it to me. I looked at Father, who nodded, then took the package. I carefully unfastened the bindings and peeled the flaps of the cloth away to find a bright blue cloak with subtle white threadwork along the edge and a clasp of silver resting at the collar. I let out a gasp as I traced my fingers over the threads, reading the intricate work with admiration. Cloaks were simple enough to make, but great time and care had been put into this one. "Go on, lass," Father said as he handed the woman a small pouch of coins. "Put it on." His instruction had broken me from the spell of admiration the cloak had cast on me. I nodded and set the wrapping cloth on the counter, then threw the cloak around me, fumbling with the clasp. Thorin moved in front of me and patted my fingers out of the way. "Let me," he insisted as he secured the clasp and straightened the cloak around my form. "Thank you," I smiled. Once the cloak was in place, I looked up at Father. "It's wonderful." He smiled. "Thank Greta for her excellent work." I turned and looked up at the elderly woman. "Thank you so much. It's perfect." Greta smiled and chuckled. "Wear it in good health, bairn." "My thanks again," Father said to Greta, then turned and led us away. We didn't turn back to return home, nor did we head to the forges. Instead, Father led us in a direction I had never been allowed to go before. We were headed to the eastern doors. The atmosphere of the halls changed in this direction. The raucous of the market and the chorus of the forges died away, slowly melting into a soft stirring of musk and leather. My excitement grew to a fever pitch as I realized what was happening. I was being taken outside for the very first time. Young dwarves were kept inside hills and mountains for their first few years to keep them safe. When a stripling was considered ready, they were taken outside to show them how large the world truly was, and why the underground territories of their people were so important. While this wouldn't be the first time I had seen the surface of the world, This would be the first time I was seeing Middle-earth with my own eyes. We walked for nearly an hour to get to the eastern doors, which stood tall and open, letting in the sunlight. The sunlight was so bright to my eyes, which were no longer used to such bright light, that I had to shade my eyes with my hands. Fresh air rushed over me, filled with the scent of open plains, animal fur, and cool snow. As we stepped past the threshold of the eastern doors, the world opened up to me. The iron hills sloped down in lazy waves, and the sight of wild, untamed land sprawled out ahead, over countless miles that the height of the doors allowed. From the doors were the yards of keeping, where the great goats and boars of the iron hills were raised. The yards lay along the eastern slip, where stone broke open into wide, terraced ground. The pens were cut directly into the hillside, low stone walls stacked, thick and broad, mortared tight, their surfaces worn smooth by the generations of hooves, tusks, and hands. Unlike parts of the stone halls, nothing here was decorative. Every wall leaned just slightly inward, every gate reinforced with iron bands where beasts were most likely to push. The air smelled of hay, animal heat, and iron. Always iron. Training rings sat between the pens, packed with earth and mixed with crushed stone so it would not turn to mud, ringed with posts scored deep by tusks and horns. Some posts bore old gouges, filled in with fresh wood. Others left as they were as a quiet record of animals that had tested their limits. The war beasts themselves were calm. The great goats stood shoulder to shoulder in their enclosures, massive creatures with thick, weathered coats and thick curling horns scarred by age and sparring. Their eyes were steady, assessing rather than wild. They shifted when handlers passed by, but they did not shy away. Further downslope, behind heavier walls, were the boars. They were enormous. Low-slung, iron-muscled beasts with bristled backs and tusks capped in blunt iron for training purposes. Their pens were deeper, half sunk into the hill, with stone troughs worn hollow by years of feeding. Chains hung slack from anchor rings into the rock. These were used for discipline, or when the handlers needed a boar to be still for other types of care. Between the pens moved dwarves in work clothes. Some brushed hides, some checked hooves and tusk. Some simply leaned against the walls, watching and supervising the work. These stables were not for show or parade. They were workyards, places where animals were raised the same way dwarves raised their children. Patiently, firmly, with the expectation of purpose rather than indulgence. Father let me stand there in silence for a time, to take in the sight of the wider world as the cool winds of the iron hinds billowed through my cloak and hair. I took in the wondrous sight of the training grounds before me and of the world beyond. Finally, his hand settled on my shoulder. I looked up at him, curious to see what he would say. He smiled down at me and motioned with his head. "Go on then. Pick one." I stared up at him, curious as to his meaning. "Pick one?" He nodded. "The trainers have separated a pack of the boars and goats that are ready for training. Go pick yours." My eyes lit up with understanding as a gasp escaped me unbidden. "I'm to learn to ride?" "You're a daughter of the Iron Hills and a descendant of Thror," he chuckled. "Of course you'll ride. And starting tomorrow, you'll begin taking care of your mount, training with weapons, and I expect you to keep up your lessons at the forge as well." I flashed my teeth in a toothy grin. "Yes, Da, I won't disappoint you." He tousled my head. "I know you won't, lass. Now go on, make your choice." I moved forward, working my way down a dirt path well worn into the hillside by countless years of work. One of the handlers waved me over to a pen where a few dozen goats and boars meandered about. He opened the gate and let me pass. These were not full-grown mounts that carried armored dwarves into battle. These were young, old enough to learn and grow alongside a child who would one day ride it into battle. The gate closed behind me, and I was alone with the beasts. The goats, known to dwarves as Harkoon, which loosely translated to hard stepper or stone footed ones, were smaller than I had imagined, though still large to my eyes. They were broad-chested, thick-necked creatures with powerful legs and clever, assessing gazes. The boars, also known as Goruk, and translated to breaker, rushed, line breaker. Goruk was also a bit of a slur, since dwarves used the words to describe the appearance of an orc. They were less crowded and spread about the area with less care for what was going on around them. As I moved through the pen, I noticed a particular goat watching me more closely than the others. Where the others kept me in the periphery, this one watched me directly. Its coat was a deep slate gray along the spine, fading into lighter ash as the flanks, with darker bands circling its legs like old, inked rings. Its face was pale, almost silver, marked by a single dark streak that ran from one eye down to the muzzle, as though it had been brushed there by soot. The fur was already thick, coarse at the outer later but dense beneath, built to shed wind and cold rather than rain. I stopped and looked back at it, turning to face it. It didn't move, nor did it lower or turn its head, nor step back when confronted. It only watched. The wind tugged at my cloak, the kiss of it still sending a thrilling sensation through me. I took a step forward. The goat's ears tilted, tracking my movement, but held its ground. I moved closer still, reaching out my hand. My fingers brushed its shoulder, slipping through the thick, coarse fur. The goat snorted, then leaned into my touch. That was all the encouragement I needed. I wrapped my arms around its neck as best as I could manage and pressed my forehead into the dense fur of its neck. The goat shifted its weight to keep balance, patient and unbothered. "This one," I said softly. The handler who had let me into the pen hummed, "Good feet on that one, lass. Steady temper, too. A fine choice." "He'll need a name," Father said as he approached the pen. "Better make it a strong one, so everyone will know that when you charge in, that name is carrying you home." I stepped back and looked at the goat, who watched me expectantly, as if it understood what Father had said and was awaiting my decision. There was only one name I could think of that would be appropriate. The name of one who had already carried me through many adventures, kept me safe, and cared for me. I reached up and gave the goat a confident smile. Mayroon, and woe to anyone who stands before our charge.